Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to see all these new faces. We're glad to have you all here today, especially so early in the morning on a Saturday, but I know that your efforts will be rewarded. We've got a great lineup of speakers today, and it's going to be very exciting. I don't want to take away from our speaker right now, so I'm going to go ahead and get started with Integrity Florida. We have Ben Wilcox here. I'm so sorry, Ben. Ben's bio includes graduating from Florida State University in 1976, and then he worked for a reporter for the Florida Public Radio Network, providing reports on state government and the Florida legislature to public radio stations throughout the state. In '78, he became a news director for the network, and he also became news director for WFSU FM, the public radio station in Tallahassee. Right now, he is part of Integrity Florida, and he is the research director for it, a nonpartisan research institute and government watchdog. He assists in the development of research reports into issues involving ethics and transparency in Florida government. We've had a relationship with Integrity Florida for several years now, and as a result of that relationship with Integrity Florida, we've had the first significant ethics reform done in Florida since 1976, and that was a big deal for Florida. So we are very excited about our relationship with Integrity Florida, and without further ado, we have Ben Wilcox.
Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Really glad to be here. Drove over from Tallahassee this morning. Got up kind of early, but I'm awake now and glad to be with you. As Catherine said, I'm Ben Wilcox. I started with public radio covering the Florida legislature in 1976, and I've been involved with the legislature every year since then in one way, shape, form, or another. Most recently, I've been lobbying the legislature, and that's what we did this past year with Integrity Florida. We partnered with the Tea Party Network, and we put together a coalition of groups. Actually, it was Tea Party Network, Progress Florida, and Common Cause. And we were all working to try to pass some ethics reform. It was the first significant ethics reform that has come before the Florida legislature in 36 years. And some of y'all who are as old as me might think back to 1976. That was the first year that I covered the legislature as a reporter, and that was the year that Ruben Askew led the push for the Sunshine Amendment, created the Ethics Commission to crack down on corruption in government. And it was also the year that Dempsey Barron was the president of the Florida Senate. Don Tucker was the Speaker of the House. And that was the last time that we've seen an attempt to end corruption in government, promote ethics reform in Florida government until this year. I've got good news for you. This year, Florida lawmakers began the process of cleaning up government and restoring trust with Floridians. Senate President Don Gates and House Speaker Will Weatherford promised sweeping ethics and campaign finance reform, and they delivered. After a 36-year drought, Florida lawmakers should be commended for advancing good government reforms in our state capital. Integrity Florida, we're a young organization. We've only been, we were formed about a year and a half ago, and our mission is to promote integrity in government and expose public corruption. Integrity Florida is grateful that many of our research recommendations were included in the ethics and campaign finance legislation that became law. And while there is still more work to do to make ethics laws stronger and to fix a broken campaign finance system, Florida is finally moving in the right direction on these issues. The new ethics reform laws give the public 4 new ways to start ethics complaints through U.S. attorneys, state attorneys, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and the Governor's Office. Those 4 entities can now refer credible ethics complaints to the Florida Commission on Ethics. While not the full self-initiation of investigations that the Ethics Commission should have, this process is a good first step to fight corruption and to reduce frivolous ethics complaints. Integrity Florida encourages U.S. attorneys, state attorneys, FDLE, and the governor's office to create report corruption hotlines to collect anonymous tips from the public to address public corruption. Also included in the ethics laws, financial disclosure forms for public officials are now posted online in a searchable database for the public to access. The Florida Commission on Ethics will begin moving toward an electronic filing system for financial disclosure to make the process smoother for filers and to provide better quality information for the public to read in an easier to read format. The law also requires more ethics training for public officials. Public officials now are required to have 4 hours a year of ethics training. The new law also makes it easier for the Ethics Commission to collect fines for officials who are late in filing their financial disclosure. Do you realize up until to this point when this law passed this year, the Ethics Commission would issue fines for public officials who did not file their financial disclosure reforms or who filed them late, and the officials could just ignore the fines and not pay them. Now, the Ethics Commission can go out there and garnish the wages of public officials who are in office and haven't paid their fines for late filing financial disclosure. It also extends the allowed collection period from 4 years to 20 years. So the Ethics Commission can keep going after these officials that many times are still serving in office and collect those fines that they owe the public, they owe to us. Voting conflict standards and disclosures have also been strengthened. The new law improves revolving door rules to limit legislators from lobbying for 2 years after they leave office. New restrictions are also included to prohibit officials from obtaining crony jobs based on their public office. You might remember the former House Speaker Ray Sampson, who on the day that he was sworn in as Speaker of the House, got a $100,000 a year job at Northwest Florida State College after he had steered a lot of money when he was previously serving as the House Appropriations Committee Chair to that very same college. The legislature this year also passed a new campaign finance law, which raises contribution limits from $500 to $3,000 for state candidates and to $1,000 for legislative and local candidates. Now you might think that that's not a good thing that they raise those contribution limits, but really it is, because what we had in Florida was a system where campaign contributions were limited to direct contributions to candidates were limited to $500. That may sound like that's a good thing, but in actuality, candidates were still able to take in unlimited amounts of contributions, but it had to go through a more secretive kind of process. So candidates could set up what they call a CCE, a Committee of Continuous Existence, and they could raise unlimited contributions that way. They could take unlimited money from the political parties, but they could only take a $500 direct contribution to the candidate. Our position is that it's better to have the money going directly to the candidates, so the candidates are required to report who they get their money from and how they spend it. You can then hold the candidate accountable for the way they're raising money and spending money. The new campaign finance law also requires 24-hour disclosure of contributions and expenditures in the final days of state-level campaigns and a more rapid filing schedule for campaign reports year-round for candidates and committees. The law streamlines independent committees by eliminating committees of continuous existence, known as CCEs. In addition, it directs the Florida Division of Elections to create an enhanced statewide campaign finance database. So basically, we're going to have more disclosure. We're going to know where the candidates are raising money and how they're spending money. Unfortunately, there's still more to be done in the Sunshine State to take on the problem of public corruption. 3 of our mayors, you may have seen in the news, were recently arrested. And Florida led the nation in federal public corruption convictions between 2000 and 2010. Even the New York Times recently called Florida, quote, a hothouse for corruption. A reputation for corruption hurts all Floridians and undermines the state's ability to attract jobs, talent, and capital. Florida could repair its image and be on track for a better future if our policymakers set a goal of making our state and local governments the most open, ethical, responsive, and accountable in America. Here are several solutions that Integrity Florida believes could help Florida achieve that goal. First, let's finish the job of meaningful ethics reform. Senate President Don Gates and House Speaker Will Weatherford prioritized passage of several of the anti-corruption recommendations outlined in the 19th statewide grand jury report, but lawmakers still need to pass the rest. That means giving the Florida Commission on Ethics the authority to initiate investigations. It means tougher penalties for ethics violations, and it means strengthening the independence of inspector generals, protecting whistleblowers, and a stronger ethics code. Second, let's eliminate cronyism. The state ethics code should cover all employees and vendors performing a government function or service, including government-run groups like Enterprise Florida. There should be criminal penalties for conflicts of interest, misuse of public position, and self-dealing. All programs that function as systems of legalized corruption and cronyism should be overhauled or eliminated. State and local governments should be free of favoritism and instead focused on creating vibrant communities where every employer matters and entrepreneurship thrives. Third, let's offer fair access to public office. More Floridians should have a chance to serve in the state legislature. The campaign finance system should be overhauled so that the pool of credible candidates includes more than just special interest group insiders, political party favorites, and incumbents. All candidates should have a fair opportunity to run for office, broadcast their message, enter debates, and offer voters more choices. Let's restore the runoff election. Let's eliminate single-member districts, and let's close the write-in loopholes. Fourth, let's have open budgets. Government budgets at the state and local levels should be statements of our priorities that are built with more public participation, access to data to track results, and maximum benefits for all Floridians. A state budget tracking website that includes all records related to planning, budgeting, contracts, and personnel should be launched immediately. Fifth, let's have open contracts. Let's end bid tampering, bid rigging, bid splitting, and no-bid contracts. Let's create a uniform, competitive procurement policy and an online platform for access to all records for state and local government entities. Let's allow more citizen voices into the contracting process and never allow contracts to be approved without disclosure of the vendor name. And finally, let's open the data. Let's unleash all of the non-confidential data funded by taxpayers to be used by consumers and for citizens to know if government programs are working. Floridians should be able to easily measure the success of all government programs to get better results. We could use information already collected by our government if bulk data were made available for download and use. Mobile app developers and researchers would use this data to create jobs, and tell us more about school choices for our children and our health care options. Policymakers should enact these reforms now to end corruption, protect jobs, and secure Florida's future. And that concludes my prepared remarks, and I would be happy now to answer any questions, and just let's talk. Yes, sir. Integrity Florida believes that's a priority.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Well, the question was regarding what I said earlier about restoring the runoff election, and the fact that, if you have 5 candidates in a race, one, as it stands now, without a runoff election, one candidate could, no matter how, they may get a small percentage of the vote, but they still get more votes than the other 4 candidates, and so they become the nominee. We believe that the old system where we had a runoff election allowed for more competitive races and gave underdogs a little bit better chance of making their case to voters. And I think when we eliminated the runoff election, it was a mistake.
I think the worst case, and that may have been in my city, our mayor was up for re-election. Only another Republican was going to run against him in the primary. So of course, hardly anybody turned out. It was about 2% of the voters turned out for the election. And of course, he was elected. And there was no right general election for mayor. The other problem was they tacked on adding an additional 2 years onto the term of office at the same election. So now we've got somebody nobody likes for 6 years.
Wow.
Yep. This is really what this is all about. We're trying, Integrity Florida and the Tea Party Network share, I think, a common goal, which is we want to take back our government. That's what this is really all about. Yes, sir.
Two questions. If you have a runoff, when is that going to be scheduled? If your primary is late August and your general is early November? On the runoff issue, if the primary is late August and the general is early November, that's a very short time frame to even gear up for the general, for whoever wins the primary. So when is the runoff going to be scheduled?
I think the way it used to work was that the primary election was earlier in August. It was more like the beginning.
Earlier in the year would be great.
Yeah, more like the beginning of August, and then the runoff election would take place towards the end of August.
Well, some states like Oregon have a primary in May, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Second question. I heard you say the limits on those running for office for Tallahassee, the contribution limits have been increased. Could you state that again?
Yes. The contribution limit on a direct contribution to a candidate used to be $500 in Florida. The legislature this year raised it to $3,000 for statewide candidates and $1,000 for legislative and local candidates.
Is that effective this year?
Yes.
When you say statewide, you're talking about those running for Tallahassee?
Yes, yes, sir. I'm talking about statewide candidates being the governor and members of the cabinet.
Okay, but if they're running for representative, what is the limit?
It's 1,000.
For the primary and 1,000 for the general?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm frustrated at the state licensing requirements for so many professions, which end up being just legalized antitrust activities to support some group that's supported by a lobbyist that spreads a bunch of money around. I guess probably the worst is interior designing, but barber, hairdressers, and dog groomers, and taxi cabs, and it goes on and on and on and on and on and on. They form an industry group, and they spread some money around up at Tallahassee to get in some phony education requirements and testing requirements and registration requirements, all designed just to keep people out so that they can distort the marketplace. And nobody seems to care about that or do anything to control that blatant cronyism to support interior designers, for instance, which is a matter of taste and a matter of art and shouldn't be regulated at all. And I wondered if I'd like to hear your comments on that.
Well, you're absolutely right that that's a problem in Tallahassee. And I'm like I said earlier, I'm a lobbyist, but I don't get involved in those kind of professional kind of food fights like that. I'm working for good government. But there are over 2,000 lobbyists in Tallahassee, and every interest out there, whether it's your interior designers or your barbers or your hairstylists or everybody, they've all got lobbyists, and whenever you have a legislative session, they're all up there fighting for those special interests. So that's I don't know what the solution is, except yeah. Yes.
You want to pass?
I'm from Marion County, and we had a really interesting thing happen in the last election. The populace turned out, and we had a three-man race, a constitutional sheriff, and two Republicans. And I say Republicans maybe with a question mark. And the guy that won turned out, and he was having kind of an affair with the principal of a charter school on government time because he was the sheriff's deputy. And so he said, I think I'll step down from the office. Well, the Republican Party, and I wonder about that, went into conference and they decided that the guy that won second place would be the new sheriff. Is anything going to be done in the state legislature? And since you're a lobbyist, you can at least work and maybe get a bill started that says that if you have an elected official and before he's sworn in, for some reason he's disqualified or quits, that we have a new election rather than just saying, hey, the next guy in line gets it. Because he was not the one that the majority of the people in the county wanted. Can you speak on that, please?
Sure. Well, I personally agree with you. I think the voters should be given a chance to actually select who they want to, in this case, be the sheriff. But I'm sure the party or whoever did select the sheriff's candidate is going to make the argument that, well, elections cost money, and we're trying to save the taxpayers' money by, just appointing the person who came in second place. But I don't know. It's going to take people like yourself to go, make those arguments to the local government or to the political party there in the county to say that you're not going to stand for it. You want the voters to be able to select their representative.
I do want to pass a lot of laws, but our government doesn't seem to count when it comes to the laws. They do what they want. If 130% of the population can vote for a person and nothing is done, there's something wrong with that. Also, about his question about the taxes, the way to get rid of the lobbyists and the IRS, initiate the fair tax. Because a lot of people don't understand, you won't have the federal government taking your taxes. We bring more companies back to the country because we have the lowest tax rate than any place. It brings jobs, it'll get rid of all the lobbyists, they won't be putting money in their pocket. And people really need to look more into, well, you don't want the licenses. I mean, they're putting money in their pockets and we're suffering and government does what they want.
Well,
So how are you going to enforce the laws you want them to pass?
the first thing we need to do, and when I talked about a little bit earlier, is we need to open up our government. We need open budgets, we need open contracts, and we need open data. But if the public was actually able to see our state budget and how our money is being spent, then we could act as a watchdog. We could have 19 million Floridians all acting as a watchdog over state government. And there's a task force that is meeting right now that was created by the legislature this past year that is looking at designing an open budget transparency website. And if that website does what it's supposed to do, we will be able then to go look and see, where our money's going, how our state government is spending our money. And when you think about it, and it is, and we need to remember, it is our money. And those people in the legislature and in state government are working for us. And, until we can actually see how our money is being spent and then hold our elected officials accountable, we're not going to make any progress in what you're wanting to do. Sunshine is the best disinfectant, for public corruption. And if we can open up the budgets, let the public see how our money is being spent, then I think we can start to make some progress and expose some of this corruption that we all know is going on.
Yeah. Mr. Wilcox, my name is John Lackey, and please excuse my ignorance. And I'm very interested, I think everybody else is, what you're speaking of here. One of the questions, and we definitely need some reform in ethics, in my opinion, what I've seen in Tallahassee, Florida. But who is it that finances you to do this work?
That's a good question. We've had, Integrity Florida is primarily a research institute. So we put out in the past year 7 different research reports. 2 of them looked at ethics reform. 2 of them looked at Enterprise Florida, the state's economic development agency, and we talked about some of the cronyism and corruption that's involved in the giving subsidies and incentives to corporations in the name of creating jobs, and then really not holding those companies accountable for the jobs that they say they're going to create and they don't really create. But of those research reports, we had 2 of them that were funded. One was funded by the Collins Institute at FSU. The other one was funded by Americans for Prosperity, an organization that you probably know pretty well. We were just down in Orlando for Americans for Prosperity's national convention down there, and saw a lot of good Tea Party members down there. And we made my partner Dan Krasner made a presentation to the conference on cronyism and corruption. But basically, we've had over 60 donors, and aside from the personal donations, we've had the 2 research reports that were funded by those 2 organizations that I mentioned, and that's how we're funded. we're still working on that part of it. A lot of our funding has come out of my pocket and out of Dan Krasner's pocket. Yes.
Hi, I'm Carrie Sewell from Interlochen, and yesterday was brought up about the Colorado legislatures who were recalled, and we don't have a recall mechanism in Florida. Would you support, I guess it's going to have to be a constitutional amendment, to hold our legislators accountable so that we, the people, could get rid of them between elections?
I think. Yes, I think Integrity Florida would support that. We're all about any kind of way that the voters and the citizens can hold our government accountable. We're in favor of that.
First of all, I want to thank you for the work that you do. I think it lends a lot of credibility, the fact that I think you are a very bipartisan operation. And I have lots of questions, but I have to narrow it down. I'm against the cronyism, so much that's done in the name of economic development. But the question I'm going to ask has to do with tax money going to government agencies to hire their own lobbyists to work against the taxpayer. And I can give you a couple examples. In Hillsborough County, where I live, we have a public transportation commission that regulates taxis, ambulances, tow trucks, and essentially what you have them doing is keeping out the competition. And new entrepreneurs with new ideas aren't able to come in. They limit the number of licenses or vehicles that you can have through these medallions. They also have a minimum limo ride of $50, and so that's a big problem. So we've got a couple of legislatures writing a bill, but they've hired for $90,000 a lobbyist to essentially work against us. And then another example is in Pinellas County, where the transit agency has spent over $750,000 for a public relations agency who is giving them tips on how to win the referendum. It's actually already on, I believe it's on the ballot. So is there any way that we can, how do we combat these taxpayer-funded, they're using our tax money as a weapon against us to advocate against us in good government?
I think you're doing all you can do. I mean, just by being a part of the Tea Party network, being here for this meeting, showing your concern, showing you're engaged, take it to the government there and demand that they end those practices. I mean, that's just wrong. They're using our money, to work against us or against our best interests. And they're doing it, as you say, because they are able to hire a lobbyist who can, gain special influence there. It's just wrong. But grassroots groups like the Tea Party network, that's the only way we're going to take our government back.
The committees of continuing existence the chair of the ethics committee was famous for being the biggest user of, and used those apparently unlimited ability to raise funds and then by advertising on television to try to smear the opposition is what we witnessed in Pinellas County, and I think happened in Jacksonville. Now apparently, as I understood it, it's been eliminated. So what vehicle is still there to accomplish that same kind of backhanded campaigning, negative campaigning against opponents by being able to raise $200,000 and $300,000? Am I understanding that right? Is that what was going on with the CCEs? And has the elimination of them really happened, or is it just being switched over to another vehicle?
That's a really good question. They have eliminated the CCEs, but they've given what used to be called, and are still called political committees, they've given the political committees the same ability to do what CCEs were able to do. So, they're still going to be able to do, run negative advertising against folks. The one thing that was accomplished by eliminating the CCEs is that we were hearing cases of legislators who are basically living out of these committees, these CCEs. And they were using the CCEs to pay their rent, to buy meals, to get around the gift ban that we have in Tallahassee of, the ban on lobbyists buying, giving legislators gifts, buying them meals and that kind of thing. And they were using the CCEs to get around that gift ban. So that's a good thing that was accomplished by doing away with the so-called CCEs. But the problem of being able to set up a political committee and raise unlimited amounts of money and then spend that money on advertising and oh, by the way, your political committee is called, Floridians for a Perfect World or something like that. This, something that sounds great, but it's probably being used to do exactly the opposite of what the name is. But that's still a problem, and it's a reason why as I said earlier, our campaign finance system was improved a little bit this year by the legislature, but it's still broken. Yes?
Sir, you mentioned Enterprise Florida, and I saw a report the other day that the governor was on that committee, and I also understand that they just voted themselves a $7 million bonus based on what could be happening in the next 5 or 6 years. How many people are on that committee? And I understand 75% of that money is taxpayer money. And how do we go about clipping the wings of some stuff like that?
Okay, now you got me going now. Enterprise Florida, and thank you again to the Tea Party Network for standing with Integrity Florida and again Progress Florida. Kind of an unlikely coalition, but we all came out and stood in opposition to the fact that Enterprise Florida's staff just received $635,000 in bonuses, right? And this is an agency that is, when it was created in 1992, it was supposed to be a public-private partnership that would, work to create high-paying jobs in Florida. The original goal was to create 200,000 new jobs in Florida by 2005. Here we are, 2013, 8 years past that deadline, and Enterprise Florida has created half of what they promised. We're at about 100,000 jobs right now. The Enterprise Florida, it's got a 60-member board. The governor is as you said, the governor is the chair of the board. All members of the cabinet sit on the board. Representatives from the House and the legislature are on the board. Florida Tax Watch, Dominic Calabro has a permanent seat on the board. The Florida Chamber of Commerce has a permanent seat on the board. But then the rest of that 60-member board is made up of representatives of the biggest corporations in Florida. And they have to pay $50,000 each to have that seat on the Enterprise Florida board. What do they get in return for that $50,000? They get the subsidies and the incentives from our taxpayer money. As I said earlier, it was supposed to be a 50-50 partnership. More than 85% of Enterprise Florida's funding comes from the taxpayers. It's never achieved that 50-50 goal that they had in the very beginning. And so they're handing out these subsidies to corporations like Publix and Winn-Dixie, and they're all good, corporations, but they're just playing the game. I mean, they know that if they buy that seat on the Enterprise Florida board, they're going to get millions of dollars in taxpayer incentives, for them to hopefully, and it's really just a promise. I mean, they're saying, we're going to create, so many jobs if you give us, so many millions in taxpayer money. And a lot of times the jobs don't materialize. And there's no real accountability. They don't go back and say, give us back our money if those jobs don't get created. So we've been working to, expose this kind of corporate cronyism, and Americans for Prosperity have been our partner on this effort. Americans for Prosperity, as you probably know, have a 5 for Florida plan, and their number one priority on that 5 for Florida plan is they want to end corporate welfare. They just want to. They're tired of government going out there and picking winners and losers in the marketplace. Why does Winn-Dixie get millions in taxpayer money as a subsidy, and yet another supermarket what's the supermarket in Pinellas there? The other Sweet Bay is.
Oh, Sweet Bay.
Yeah. Why should Publix get millions in a subsidy, and Sweet Bay Supermarkets, which is closing, supermarkets all over Florida, they don't get, a subsidy. So that's what Integrity Florida is concerned about, and what Americans for Prosperity is concerned about, is that government goes out there and picks winners and losers in the marketplace and spends our money, and there's no real accountability. And the jobs the jobs they promise don't really materialize.
Yeah, Mr. Wilcox, good morning. I hope you had some Dunkin' Donuts coffee on your way in here from Tallahassee. It's actually, I have a 4-pronged question. First question, on the ethics committee or commission, do they have indictment authority? Second, is the ethics commission ethical? How actually are they selected? Third is, please give out your website. And fourth is, how much meat is in the current ethics laws in reference to fining and convicting?
Right. The Ethics Commission is a 9-member commission. It's a mix of, some are appointed by the governor, some are appointed by the House Speaker, and some are appointed by the Senate President. It's required to be bipartisan. So of the 9-member commission, 5 members will be from one party, and 4 members will be from the other party. And I've found our experience. We go to every ethics commission meeting, and we just had one on yesterday, and we found the ethics commission to be very professional and not motivated by politics or any personal vendettas or anything like that. They're very professional. They judge the cases based on their merits, and we think their decisions are fair. But you're right in that they don't have they can't indict people criminally. Anything the Ethics Commission does, if it finds probable cause for an investigation, it's a civil investigation, and all they can do is impose fines as penalties up to $10,000. And typically, fines don't get anywhere near $10,000. The typical, ethics fine for an ethics violation is about $1,000. So we really do need to still strengthen our ethics code. We need to have tougher penalties for ethics violations, and we need to give the Ethics Commission expanded authority to self-initiate investigations. Right now, the Ethics Commission, even if it sees a clear case of an ethics violation, they can't investigate that case unless someone files an ethics complaint first. So we rely on citizens like yourselves to file an ethics complaint. It has to be a sworn complaint, with your name on it, and unfortunately, that if that complaint turns out to be frivolous or like motivated by some kind of personal vindictiveness, then the party who the complaint was filed against can come back and ask for attorney's fees, from the person who filed the complaint, which that actually has a chilling effect on, people being willing to step up and file an ethics complaint when they see a potential problem. So there are lots of things we need to do to improve our. Well, I do get your point. Yeah, I do get your point. But I think that the folks on there are really doing a pretty good job of judging cases based on their merit. I mean, they are appointed by the governor and they are appointed by the legislature. Yeah, you've got a good point. And we also need to, we need to get much more tougher on ethics enforcement. We need to have criminal, penalties for some of these, conflict of interest situations, which we don't. I mean, as I was saying, the whole ethics, regulatory system is a civil regulatory system. We need to have criminal penalties where people can actually, be sent to jail if they, if you notice in Florida, whenever somebody gets arrested for public corruption, like the 3 mayors that were just arrested in South Florida, it's always the federal government coming in and, the Justice Department or the FBI that makes the arrest. I mean, our state laws are not tough enough to deal with public corruption. We need to get better at that.
Yes, sir. I guess I have the microphone.
Oh, okay.
My name is Gordon Knighton, and I want to thank you for all the work you do. And it's clear we don't have to look very far to have ethics concerns. And because of your particular background, I wanted to ask you about public radio.
Yep.
And public television and public anything. We're giving out grants and we're giving tax credits. We're giving lots of benefits to corporations who in turn give to these companies who in turn are matched with federal monies, which really comes out of our pocket entirely. And we're told, oh no, they're not being funded by tax dollars entirely. Well, how much are they really getting? And what can we do? Do you really think we need public radio and public television this day and age with all the local media we have?
I don't know. I like to listen to public radio, and I don't watch public television that much, but there are programs that I enjoy.
I think that they are a lobbying arm of the Democratic Party and of the socialists who permeate our government right now.
Yeah.
And that's why I think they should be gone.
Well, they do a really good job of just fundraising themselves. I'm not sure that they still need tax dollars for support. I mean, maybe we should just cut them loose and let them try to fundraise. But I can tell you, I've worked for public radio for 20 years. I was news director for the Florida Public Radio Network, and we just tried to call it like it is. We started producing the program called Capitol Report that covered, ran every night and covered the Florida legislature. And we didn't worry about whether it was Democrats or Republicans in charge. When I first started, the Democrats were in charge, and we just tried to tell it like it is.
Thank you for what you're doing. And my question is, could you elaborate on that hotline? Could you elaborate on the hotline for the anonymous tips? In particular, it's difficult in county government. They know where you live, and they're vindictive. So could you elaborate on that? Is it up now? Is it going to be? Thank you.
Yeah. I don't know that they actually publicly set up hotlines. What we have now is 4 new ways for ethics complaints to be filed against public officials. One is they can be referred by U.S. attorneys, they can be referred by state attorneys, they can be referred by the governor's office, and they can be referred by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So, in essence, what you could do if you wanted to anonymously report, be a whistleblower and report public corruption, you could call the governor's office, or you could, send an anonymous letter to the governor's office detailing, that case of public corruption. And the governor's office, if they feel like it's a valid, complaint and something that the Ethics Commission should look into, the governor's office or FDLE or U.S. or state attorneys can refer that then to the Ethics Commission, and your name doesn't have to be on it. So this is the first time we've had a way for people to anonymously report public corruption. So it's a step forward, but it's not ideal. I mean, I would like to see the Ethics Commission set up a hotline and be able to take anonymous complaints and then have the ability to self-initiate an investigation if they feel that complaint was worthwhile. But we're not at that point yet. That's why we need to still get tougher with our ethics reform.
Let's thank our speaker.
Thank you, everybody. IntegrityFlorida.org. And let me just close by, again, thanking the Tea Party Network for all the hard work you did to get the ethics reform that was passed this year. I've got to say that having worked side by side with Catherine in the halls of the state capitol, she's a tremendous advocate for the Tea Party and really does a great job.